My parents moved to Amsden in the spring of 1943. It was a lovely place to live. Great community. There were quite a lot of green spaces and nice parks. And of course, Park Hospital, which is now Trafford, was the local hospital. My father was a Manchester City Councillor, and when I was 8, Aneurin Bevan came to stay the night with us because he was going to launch the NHS. My mother said to me, "We're going to take our guest breakfast in bed and you can come with me." So we took a tray upstairs. I do remember exactly what he looked like, sitting up in bed with his pyjamas and this shock of grey hair. This matron with Aneurin Bevan, and my father as the person slightly behind. As he'd come with Bevan, he was included in going around the hospital, meeting people. My mother said it was the most amazing time to be involved in politics. We felt that we were going to build the New Jerusalem.
My name's Alison Griffiths. I started in 1978 at Trafford, doing my training as a student nurse, qualified as a staff nurse in 1981, and I've worked here for 36 years till I retired in 2014. Everybody was very much aware that this was the first NHS hospital. It was a hospital with history. I think we all felt we were part of something quite special. It was quite rural in a way. There was lots of grounds, there were ducks. When you came in, it was quite grand. It was quite formal. But unlike some of the hospitals where they were very big and impersonal, there wasn't the same snobbishness that there was in some of the very big hospitals. We had general surgical ward, coronary care, intensive care, 24-hour A&E, gynaecology, orthopaedics, everything. It was a all singing, all dancing, small district hospital.
My name is Hughie Erskine. I started work for Trafford Hospitals in September 1984. I retired in 2014 due to ill health. I am also a patient at Trafford. Hello, Barry.
Okay, you've left?
No, I'm still here, Barry, still mooching along. I was a painter and decorator, and I was looking for a winter job, really, to get inside out of the cold. I ended up applying for a mortician stroke casualty porter. Hey, David.
Hiya.
All right. I was probably paid £5 less than I would have had if I'd have been on the dole. But I just fell in love with it. It's hard to explain, but it was one of these jobs where you got to meet people, you were interacting with everyone from doctors, nurses, patients. Fantastic, and I just couldn't get it out of my system. Right, sir. At Trafford, consultants, doctors, nurses, porters, domestics, all socialised, all went out to the pub together, all had parties together. So there was all sorts of things where it bound people together.
I moved into the nurses' home, was on the second floor, it was very nice. No men allowed, very strict nurses' home warden. At 18 years old, I'd not seen very much of real life. And a lot of what we saw was quite shocking. Well, it was to me. People who were injured, upset, probably in the worst times of their life sometimes. And when that's completely outside your experience, it's hard to process that. So you could go back to the nurse's home and you could say, I've had a dreadful day. This has happened, that's happened. You were all walking in the same shoes. You were all walking quite a difficult road. For me, it was always the death of young children. It's kids now that I know the name of. Sorry. 30 years, 40 years, I know the names. If you don't feel a bit of the pain that the people who've lost that child feel, then how can you care for them? But you don't do this in front of them, because then you can't help. They don't need to deal with your pain. You need to deal with that.
My name is Paul Sherlock. I was born in this hospital in 1947, which was just 1 year before Aneurin Bevan came here to launch the National Health Service. In 1971, aged 24 or thereabouts, I started working here, and I continued here till I retired 5 years ago, which was over 40 years in one place. I was a biochemist in the pathology department here. We took blood or urine, other more unpleasant bodily bits and pieces, and we did chemical analysis of them. Heart, liver, kidneys, the obvious kind of organ screens that we do. Most of that was done manually, so we had to transfer samples of this fluid into a test tube, which we did by using a mouth pipette. And of course we hopefully didn't suck any of the fluid into our mouths, because who knows what could have happened. Then we added various chemicals, we had clocks, timers, things to see how long they were in, and then eventually we stuck them in the machine, shone a light through and got a result of a metre. That was how it was done in the early days. It was not just getting a result, it was kind of interpolating results from graphs. We did a lot of graph work. And then, of course, in time, the machine started to do that for you. I think that's probably where very early computerisation started to come in and handle the data for us. And there was a lot of data because there were lots more patients, lots more tests. I welcome the automation helping us to cope with the workload.
I come from being head porter stroke administrator to being the district linen services manager, which was a horrendous job at the time. They closed all of the laundry, and that was why I was brought in to sort out the transferation from one contractor to another. Horrendous phone calls from high-rate consultants because they didn't have the blues on a Monday morning, no blankets for the patients. The biggest problem I found was the lack of linen. There wasn't the resources being put into it year in, year out. Across the country, 20% of linen is either damaged, stolen, or misused. The contract, it was 15,000 pieces a day. They were getting something like 2,000 pieces. If washing's not in the system, it won't come back. And one of the things that we agreed eventually was that every year I would get 20% of my stock put back into the system. It improved and improved over the years. It will never be perfect linen, because it never is. You can't have enough.
More and more doctors wanted to do more and more tests. And so we were always plagued by a demand for more and more and more work. And in time, we developed ways of coping with that workload, but it never seemed to abate. We got into schemes where we were comparing our results with the hospital down the road, all the hospitals in the region. Then it became national, even international. Medical thirst for us to do tests seemed to go on, and often outstrip the resources committed to paying for it. Cost of our equipment was very high. We were being asked to save. So how on earth could you do more with more and more expensive equipment? We just felt you were being asked too often to squeeze even more blood out of the stone.
In the 90s, we'd shut a lot of hospitals. Beds started to become an issue. It happened very slowly, even you didn't notice at first. And then it happened more and more often. And then it happened so that you'd be ringing round each ward saying, "Do you have any beds?" before you started. And we could have 20 people sometimes in our A&E who would be without a bed. And you'd have rung far and wide, and not just within Manchester area, you know, I'm talking down as far as Chester and up past Cumbria over to Yorkshire. And then the 4-hour waiting time was introduced. And from my point of view, that was a godsend, because it focused everyone's attention on moving people through the system. Bad nights were usually Sundays and Mondays, where people hadn't gone home in the day. My bleep could go 90 times in an hour. You couldn't physically answer it sometimes at the speed that it would keep bleeping. And you didn't know how urgent it was till he answered the call. I used to imagine it was like a big wave hitting the shore as people arrived in A&E. And they took the first impact. Then it would get slightly less to the assessment unit and then less to the wards, and sort of trickle out through the hospital as things got calmer. Don't try to understand them, just rope and throw it. I often used to sing to myself Rawhide to keep myself motivated and at the speed that we need to go. Move 'em on, hit 'em up, move 'em on, hit em up, Rawhide. Move 'em up, ship 'em out, Rawhide. It's a cattle driving song.
My name's Joanne Harding. In 2004, I had my daughter Grace at Trafford, where they saved her life. And I became the campaign coordinator, fighting to keep A&E services at Trafford General. I had a really traumatic birth. I required an emergency caesarean section where it felt like a scene out of Casualty. Greta delivered all the antenatal classes and I really connected with her. I thought she was fabulous. She just made it all seem like it was going to be okay. And she said to me, "Oh, you're the little one who's always smiling." And I said, "I'm not smiling now," because it was awful. But she stayed with me. I woke up in recovery and there was this little bundle wrapped in a Trafford General towel handed to me, and the staff were just incredible. The care I received was fantastic, and they brought my daughter very safely into the world. So I'm ever thankful.
Throughout the 90s, the early 2000s, there was all sorts of financial pressure on all managers to reduce the budgets. The beginning of the end was when we become trusts. Hospitals who were given their own budget to run their own system. But what happened then is the GP practices and the health centres, they all went into their own trust. £35 million went straight out of the budget. The School of Nursing went at the same time. That took a horrendous amount of money. That's when you could see us slowly but surely getting into a deficit year after year after year. I was running all the ancillary staff at Trafford General. and the outlying hospitals. Porters, domestics, catering, about 330. I was running that with myself and an assistant and a few supervisors. Now, I wouldn't say that was top heavy. They brought some management consultants in to try and look at the deficits of the trust. One of the things proposed to me was to bring in agency staff and not have so many people on the books. And I'm saying, well, that doesn't actually work like that. You can't measure a porter by square metres. You have to measure it by the actual physical job. They were looking at it from a textbook rather than the experience of actually working in a hospital. And yeah, they had probably some good points on what they were saying, but a lot of it wasn't relevant to saving money. And can you imagine how much money they would have been getting paid to come in and tell us how to save money?
After Grace was born, maternity services were removed from Trafford, which felt incredibly disappointing because it was a really lovely, homely maternity unit here at Trafford. Once you start to remove services away from a hospital, you remove the income. So when you take maternity and paediatrics, how do you remain financially sustainable? I was deeply concerned about what was going to happen when the hospital was acquired by another trust, and we wanted guarantees that we weren't going to lose any more services.
When I found out that my local hospital was at threat, at risk, that stirred up feelings for me that what right have these people got to make decisions without me as a local mum, as a local resident being involved in?
We got thousands of signatures for our petition, and then we trotted off to Downing Street. Sadly, we didn't win the battle.
This hospital had just been taken over by a bigger hospital, and I just had this fear that it was going to maybe not matter quite so much. The old people used to come here, young doctors would say to me, "Oh, I love this hospital, everyone's so friendly." And I thought, is this going to survive when we become part of a bigger setup? This hospital had a very key place in the development of the NHS, and so I kind of loved this hospital. Some of my colleagues didn't survive the competition for their own job because I'd have had a colleague at the bigger hospital perhaps competing for the same job. I didn't really want to go to that. I think by going at 65, at a time when the government was making some horrible threats about our pensions, I was on a final salary pension. I felt there were a number of things all playing together, and for me to go then was optimal.
I had a heart attack while on duty. I was running round and not feeling entirely 100%, and some of my colleagues said, "You don't look so good." I said, "Oh, I just feel a bit uncomfortable." And they talked me into going to casualty, and I'd had a heart attack. I mean, it was caused through stress. I've no physical damage. It's all good. You know, didn't need stents, didn't need any physical treatment. It was stress. The pressure to hit the target became, at periods of time, the most important thing. And that was difficult as a nurse, balancing with, is it safe? Is it right? Is it safe? And I found that very stressful. Because you could make 100 decisions before midnight on various things. And sometimes without all the information that you might have at 9 o'clock in the morning, when people were perhaps picking over what you'd done in the cold light of day.
At first, when I was a young manager, I thrived on the stress. It gave me a buzz. The working in Trafford gave me a buzz. But I think over the years, it took its toll on me health-wise. And unfortunately, I had to retire on ill health.
At the moment, we're sitting in a rather attractive storeroom. But this is the 24-bedded ward, as are the other 3 empty wards in this block.
My first impression when I came up is it feels eerily like a sort of ghost town. And it makes me feel quite sad, really, because hospitals should be being used. We shouldn't really be having empty wards when there's such a demand out there for people requiring services.
Yes, there's 100 beds here, not being used, not staffable. Beautiful state-of-the-art mortuary, not used to the capacity or the potential that it was designed to do. Beautiful new path lab, not used. The kitchen's boarded up, gone. It's sad, it's very, very sad.
I still have a good working relationship with the hospital. My phone's always available to them to ring me. In 2011, 2012, Central Manchester took over Trafford Healthcare Trust. Some of the surgical wards were closed and transferred to Central Manchester. I was asked to come back to look after and negotiate any filming with any empty wards or any empty departments within the hospital. I negotiate a price and a location within the hospital that's free for filming with drama programmes and documentaries, advertisements, musicals. It can raise anything between 15,000 to 20,000 a year. I do believe in specialties being in a big hospital. I had cancer and I went to Liverpool because the chap that was a specialist in the country was based in Liverpool. So I take that on board. But for general surgery, general medicine, there's no reason that can't be achieved in a district hospital. There is no reason whatsoever. As long as you have the proper staffing levels and clinical excellence, you can do it anywhere.
I love the NHS. It's got the best people in the world. Absolutely the best people.
What do you think Bevan would say if you were to revisit it?
Well, the substance of what he envisioned is eroded, massively, massively eroded. It's still there, but only just.